to see you here, Ron. As those of you that have been members of the club for some time will know that Ron has been judging for us and presenting for many, many years.
Yeah.
Often with Maggie, or Maggie's been judging, and it's been absolutely brilliant. So we feel that you're sort of long-term friends, and we will be sorry to see you go.
Definitely.
I'm sure we'll persuade you to come back in some guise or other, definitely. So, but thank you, Ron. Before I pass over to Ron, can we just have a look what's coming up? I mean, for tonight, as Mark and Ron have already said, we've got the theme of red, and we've got we've got the mono round as well. So it's a brand new competition for the digital world. So this is what it looks like. I'll hand over to Ron in a minute. We'll have a break, Ron, if that's okay. Just for 10 minutes, around 10 to 9.
Yeah.
No beginners in this competition. It's thrown into the mix, but you can still be gentle, kind, nice.
Well,
things to all of us.
There's going to be a range of marks, put it that way.
Okay, okay. We plan to close by 10 o'clock, if that's okay.
Yeah, we should be finished well before then.
Okay. Mark or Matthew, is Matthew there? Is Matthew
I am here, yes.
On the oh, you are, Matthew. I've seen
yes, made it back.
If we can have a quick look at what's coming up, just to remind ourselves. I do love saying this name, so I will say it again. I've only said it for about the last 4 weeks, but we're really pleased to be welcoming Iñaki Hernandez Lassa next week for
practicing that, haven't you?
Talk on architecture. We'll have a look at the screen in a minute to see some of the images there. Also next week, it's hand-in for monochrome and colour round 2. So just a reminder on that. So it's lines and curves coming up. So red tonight, lines and curves hand-in next week. Then we have a workshop on the 2nd of February. We'll let you know nearer the time what that's looking like. And start thinking about the Peter Chesney Trophy as well, which is 5 images displayed however you like on a 40 by 50 millimetre board. I think we can enter 2, can't we, Mark?
Correct, yep.
Yeah, so we can enter 2. The idea is that it's a themed image of 5, well, themed, and it's 5 images on a board. And you can either send that through as a PDI or take a photo of it and send it through as a PDI. So it's up to you how you do that. But I'm sure Mark will be reminding us again what that looks like closer to the time. Then on 16th of Feb, we have Janet Haynes talking about creative photography. On the 23rd, we've got monochrome round 3. So that's, and the colour theme is creative. So that will be the last round in the current competition. And again, the hand-in will be the 16th of Feb. So make a note of that maybe in your diaries. I don't know if you're anything like me. I actually haven't got anything in my diary at all. I very much work by my diary or have my diary for my social events, and it's completely empty. It's quite sad, really. Just the odd committee meeting and things like that. And then on the 2nd of March, we have Astrid McGechen, I think is the name. I don't know if anyone can help me with the pronunciation. I think it's McGechen.
I think it's McGeegan.
Is it McGeegan? Thank you, Helen. Feel the Land, Photography and Emotion Landscape. So it's very much about the emotional side of the photographs she takes, and she'll be looking and explaining why she takes the photos that she does. If we have a look at the descriptors here, so here we have Iñaki and his architecture, just to give you a flavour. So that's the 19th of January. Then we have Janet Haynes on the creative photography, 16th of Feb. That looks absolutely stunning. And then Astrid with Feel the Land, Photography and Emotion Landscape on the 2nd of March. So some absolutely superb presentations coming up. So we've got a really exciting few weeks to look forward to. Also, talking committee meeting, or committee meeting is the only thing in my diary. That's tomorrow evening for those committee members and 7:45. So looking forward to seeing you all then. On that note, Ron, I think I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much. Right. Well, good evening, everybody. It's good to be back. Happy New Year. Hope you were all safe. And we can, if you'd like to run through, Mr. Projectionist.
Yes, indeed. Yes, absolutely no problem.
We're doing red first, aren't we?
That's correct. Yes, we're doing red first, and we have 30 images in the red section. So I hope I've selected the correct screen here. Can everyone see the welcome screen?
Yes.
Yes, excellent. Okay, right. In which case, without further ado, here we go. Okay, so that's the run through. So to start the evening off, we have Ninja Red.
Yes. Now you can see where red is obviously a very dominant, prominent colour. It has an enormous amount of impact. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to hold back some of these images so that, you know, a little bit more suspense happens. So we got a ninja squirrel. The squirrel is absolutely fantastic. It's so sharp. Depth of field that's been used with this is absolutely perfect. You see the whiskers, see those front paws and the claws that are on the end to help it run, scuffle up tree trunks and goodness knows what else. Yeah, the title, I think you're not going to lose any marks over the title, but I would have preferred Leaping Red because this is not, you know, this is a real animal. It's in the natural world. I mean, it doesn't matter how you are going about your business, but it looks extremely natural to me. And the way you photographed it is fantastic. So I would change the title to Leaping Red, would be much better. So we're going to hold that back.
Okay. Next up, we have there we go. We have Red.
Yes. Well, in nature, we know that red can mean certain messages. Generally, red is poisonous, don't eat me. But when these berries become ripe, we know that certain species of birds generally congregate to these bushes and absolutely decimate the fruit because it's telling the birds that it's ripe. And that's what we have here. I've no idea what the plant is because I'm not a biologist in that department. But for me, the composition is good. But I think, again, it's perhaps one-dimensional. But it does fit the criteria. And for that, it works. So a 15 for that.
Okay. Little Robin Redbreast.
Yes, the ubiquitous robin. I've got 2 in my garden at the moment. They are obviously looking at territory, and they get a little bit feisty when they're looking for territory. And occasionally it can lead to quite conflict amongst a pair of males, and it may result in one or the other might be injured enough to die. So we know all about Who Killed Cock Robin, another cock robin generally. But here's, yeah, we've got a good portrait of it. They're just slightly soft on the bill. The head may have just turned when you press the shutter, but we got all the detail in the breast and the feathers on the head. And I felt for that kind of worked enough. It's just that lack of sharpness just on that bill. It needed to be just that bit sharper. But certainly a 15 as it stands.
Okay. Local hot rod.
I can see why, you know, obviously red, it has impact straight away. Unfortunately, you've cut the car in half, haven't you? I would have preferred perhaps you going for the front of the vehicle to make the most of those headlights and perhaps the length of the bonnet. And in that sense, you're not actually cutting it in half. You're going for, you know, a general profile, as it were. And I felt, you know, this was been let down, really. Your exposure is correct. Your detail is good. But for me, it's the background is playing a bit of an important part within the scene. I needed to have that just somewhat softer, opening up the aperture just somewhat more and throwing that out of focus. But the red is there, but unfortunately not as hot as the previous image, and a 12 for that.
Cyclamen flower.
A wonderful botanical study. Now, the photographer really thought about this. Doesn't matter that it's been placed centrally. That's really strong. It can be either side. But with a subject such as this, placing it in the middle gives it a huge amount of strength. And I love the delicacy of the particular plant, the cyclamen, you know, the softness of the light as well. It's bringing out the texture in the petals. And the background perfectly suits the bloom as well, doesn't it? There are probably other cyclamen within the scene. So I'd like to hold that back, please.
Okay. 'Twas muddy.
Oh, yes. We'll all remember this, won't we, at the Tower of London, and the poppies that were there. Maggie actually was involved with all of this. She actually planted some of those poppies, quite a few. She was there several days, and then she deplanted them, and we have one in the garden as well. So it's very synonymous with that time of year. They are certainly symbolic of all those that gave their lives in the world wars that Britain has fought. And for that, you know, the mud actually complements the poppies in that particular aspect, because the muddy fields of Flanders, they certainly wouldn't have been dry, would they? So I felt that is, you know, an empathetic image with those connections. But I think I needed to make it stronger. I think a vertical format would have really suited it. If you'd have gone just a bit higher with a vertical, more depth of field with poppies, and to include the muddy pool in the foreground. So the idea was there, and a 15 for that.
Red.
Yes, it's a bit unfortunate we're going to have two following each other are very similar. Here we have the red wine being poured onto a red tablecloth. But I think pictorially, there's nothing of the photographer in it. I think you've just taken the image, just caught the moment, thought I'll have a go at that. But when we compare it with the next one coming up, you know, there is a certain element of imagination that perhaps has not been used in this image as in the next. So I was a little bit disappointed. I think, you know, you could have done more with it than what you had. It's under your control. So unfortunately, that only managed a 12.
Claret.
Yes, and it is unfortunate that, you know, they fell together. I know we could argue that you could look at the glasses, they might be suspended in mid-air, but we are assuming that it's a glass top, and it really comes across extremely well. I love the way you've used the diffusion and the way that the glasses are receding, and then we have at the end this just dollop of red wine. I like the way you vignetted the image as well, and the way you've actually used monochrome and colour together to emphasise the wine. And I really felt that you used your whole imagination in this image. You know, you really went for it, and it really is successful. So I'd like to hold that back as well.
Okay. Circle of Life.
Yeah, we all know this was at Docklands, and they used to run it every year, and then it stopped. And now they have these light shows and illuminations. It's been for the last 3 years, I think. I couldn't get there this year, of course, because of COVID. And I went to the previous 2. And of course, I remember these. And of course, the red, as I said, it has impact. And that's what this image has. It does have impact. There's a lot of areas within the scene that are totally black because you couldn't illuminate them. You know, it's impossible. I think what I might have done, because you've chosen a different angle, I'd have perhaps used a longer lens to try and, you know, just emphasize the circle of red and not have anything else either side of it, or cropped it really tight so that you made the impact, you know, where it should be. Our eye will go to that circle with the figure included, and that's where it would rest, and we'd enjoy the colours. So I think judicious cropping would have really benefited this image because it is exposed, you know, as good as you can get it. It's a 14 as it stands.
Red Admiral.
Yeah, the good old Red Admiral. Again, I think the photographer here has chosen a good point of view because generally when we see butterflies, we're looking on the focal plane. We're looking across the wings, wingtip to wingtip, with the abdomen in the center and the antennae obviously making the front end. Here you've decided to do the butterfly really sharp and on its food plant as well. And I feel that that's an extra bonus in this image. You know, it's giving it more impact. It's more in with the natural zone that this should be included in. I might have cropped that top area. There's just that bright yellow at the top that does draw the eye up. The moment you crop that off, it becomes a lot stronger. And I'm not worried about, you know, the stem of the plant coming up in the center, because the Red Admiral actually holds it very well. So that was a good one as far as I was concerned, and a 16 for the Red Admiral.
Okay. Roses are red.
Well, they certainly are. And here again, it's under your control. The light, unfortunately, didn't benefit you entirely, although it's overcast. It's kind of dull overcast. They just need just a little bit of more injection of just the stray light, just to lift the bloom itself and give the bloom depth, because we are lacking in contrast within the center of the bloom, because, you know, the darker areas should make the lighter areas stand out. And again, you know, your point of view, how you approach your subject is definitely important. And it's not going anywhere. So you could at least take, you know, you could take 5, 6, 10 images of the same bloom and, you know, wait for the light and see how they compare, and then perhaps choose the best of what you've taken. So here I felt it was a little bit soft and it just didn't stand out enough for me. And that was a 13.
Red Kite.
Well, these are glorious birds. We had one flying over our garden just after Christmas. And we have buzzards around here now, but red kites, they're gradually working their way into Essex, coming, you know, up the M4. They've been coming for about 20 years, and they're eventually getting here. They may well, in the end, or I think they are seen over London, because that's once they inhabited London. They're scavengers, and when London was, you know, in the early 1800s, full of rubbish, these birds would scavenge, and then they decided to get rid of them. They poisoned them, and actually almost they became extinct in the UK completely. The ones that we're seeing now originated from Sweden when they were reintroduced here in England. And it's fantastic to see them back in the skies, because they are a glorious bird, a huge wingspan, and they look magnificent when on the floor. I mean, this one may have some jesses on, but it could equally be a wild bird. But it's in fabulous condition, and the image is totally sharp and actually accentuating the grandeur of this bird of prey. An 18 for that.
That's Trevor Partridge. Above Val d'Isere.
Yeah. Now, it's got the red bike, of course. It has to be, you know, in the scene because of what we're judging, and this magnificent landscape beyond. And although I'm enjoying the bike, it's the landscape that's pulling you through, especially with that lonely cloud. You know, it's in a perfect position, but you know, it does have that impact with the bike, and it could be an Italian bike anyway. I've never been a motorcycle driver or anything else. I prefer four wheels if I'm going anywhere. But the composition works because the red's on the bottom, and you're allowed to go beyond the bike and into that glorious landscape. So we had two elements within the scene, or three if you add the cloud, and you know, you think that it's slightly sort of losing out because it's all very well attended. I think I might have got down, included the bike, made it the main scene, and then had the backdrop as glorious as you could get it, but softer, of course. So that's still got a 16.
The City of Arts and Sciences.
Yeah, Valencia is absolutely fabulous. And these buildings are so modern. You know, they're futuristic in their design. They're futuristic in their illumination as well. And here the photographer has waited for darkness because obviously they do stand out admirably when the sky is dark or when night has arrived. And I felt that the composition really worked because this building, when you get the reflection, it almost resembles a fish. And I think that that's been suitably acquired here in this particular image. And around them as well, I feel that you've done as good a job as you can because it could also easily be overexposed with all those bright lights down on the right-hand side. And they're not actually intruding too much within the scene because the red of this particular building is so dominant. So I'd like to hold that back as well, please.
Yep, okay. Iconic London tourist attraction.
Well, they are our red telephone boxes. How many of them are used is another aspect. I mean, they were on every street corner, weren't they? They have been removed quite a lot, but they keep them in the touristic parts of London because they're very synonymous with London, of course, like the red bus. Here we have two, what I can only suppose to be drug dealers, I think. That's what they look like. They certainly don't look like ordinary people, do they? And he's looking at his phone and the other guy's got something else in his hand. I like this general scene, but what we have got, again, is a lack of depth of field. The depth of field is too sharp. I'd want everything thrown out either side of the phone box because we have a couple on the left chatting away, you know, the gentleman and presumably his wife, you know, pushing the suitcase through, and then the cones as well. You can't do anything about the scaffolding around Big Ben. But I think it's somewhat busy, unfortunately. I might have gone, I know you didn't have long to take this picture, it's just up, take it and put the camera down. I think I might have cropped it and tried to diffuse as much of that background as I could have done. 5.6 f-stop would have been brilliant because you'd have thrown as much of that as you could out of focus. So that got a 12, unfortunately.
You say tomato.
Yes, and tomato. Mm-hmm. And another still life, but again, red. You've added some droplets of water, so you've put some of your input into the scene to actually lift it. Perhaps it's the way that it's composed is somewhat problematic. The tendrils of the stalks, I think that is appropriate because they're attached. And in that sense, you know, we have attachment to the tomatoes. But I think it's the lighting. I think a little bit more contrast, just deepen the red, really give it that bit more impact, make it stand out, jump out. And I might have filled in or cropped at that top left-hand side there, just cropped some of that out. There's a lot of dark area there that you can go into and fall out or fall into, really. So we certainly got the texture of the tomato, and the shape really is very good. But for me, I think there's just something missing from it. So that managed a, what number is it?
16.
Oh yeah, there we are. A 13 for that.
Thank you. Postbox.
Yes. There is another postbox within this scene, and if you compared the two, you can see where I'm going. It doesn't. The lighting here is flat on this postbox, which is a little bit of a shame because I want it more vibrant. And some postboxes come in different coloured reds, and that's perhaps this is one of those examples. Here again, the photographer has done their best to diffuse that background and done a very good job on it. But why, oh why, didn't you crop that white sky off? You really cut it down to the rooftop of the building so we're not allowed to escape your attention that's clearly on the postbox itself. It is an ER one, so it's in keeping with our Queen, and I think a bit more contrast could have been made of it. But it's a postbox, and it's 12 for it as well.
Okay. Fading beauty.
Yeah, I think here, you can see when a photographer's really sort of getting their act together and thinking about what they want to photograph. And even if it's cliched, it doesn't matter. So long as you've put all the effort in and the result is that of your efforts. And I think here it's definitely, this is the case in question. I like the way you've added, or maybe got it in from the garden, got the droplets of water on it, giving us a sense of the petals are those silky sort of substance where water just sits on the top of the petals. And I like the way that you've given it a diagonal as well. A diagonal concept always works. It gives us strength. It drives us in one direction. And I think here you've certainly achieved that. And that was a, oh dear, 17.
Okay. Flaming Aphrodite.
Yeah, in this case, I can understand why the photographer, wanted to have an impact, and the red, the flaming part of it, and we could almost, if we look at it long enough, there is some flaming going on. It's a visionary effort, but for me, there's not enough. The idea certainly has been achieved, but it's too messy for me. It's not sharp where it should be. There's all this kind of softness over on the right-hand side, and that unfortunately lets it down photographically as well as visually. And for me, it just didn't work, unfortunately, and that only managed a 10.
Okay. 4 shades of red.
There's another sort of, this is another setup, still life, under your control, and we have that band of white. The moment you see that band of white, it draws the eye beyond the subject that you're photographing. I think here we may have too many subjects within the scene. We have 4 to contend with. Perhaps the red lipstick on the white paper, done your lips and kissed the paper, that would have been really effective. I know it's cliched, but it'd be more effective than what we're seeing at the moment. I feel as if you just put the book down, you put the items on the book, and then you photographed it. And for me, it really hasn't got that sort of extra element, that extra sense of creativity. And that got an 11.
Okay, and Dahlia Crown.
Well, this one, see, when you follow those images previous and then you get to here, and you can see that the photographer, again, they know their botany. There's no doubt about it. They know their camera craft. They know what f-stop to put it on. And it really is a magnificent central part of the plant. The part where it's pollinated and etc., etc. I love the way the petals are curling around on the right-hand side and not on the left. So it has a sense of motion. You can almost go round anti-clockwise or clockwise, whichever way you want to go. It's got that feeling of just motion. It's been just stopped. It's a very attractive botanical image. I would certainly implore the photographer to give International Garden Photographer of the Year ago. They have lots of different sections, and you can enter as many as you like. It's quite expensive, but you'd be surprised. This could well end up in a book. It's that good. So I'm going to hold that back, please.
Okay. Tulip Mania.
Yeah, you seem to have quite a lot of botanical photographers. I know botany, it's not easy. It's just because the plant's staying in there, or you can clamp it, or you can do whatever you like with it. It's not easy to convey it. You need this three-dimensionality that they have, the shape and form that flowers and everything in the botanic world contain. So it gives you a sense of the natural world. Here, the background could be seen to be man-made. It could be sort of concrete, but that's a kind of a juxtaposition. And I suppose I did enjoy that. I like the way it's been illuminated because we can see the texture of the petals. The background is a take it or leave it, I think, for me. But the detail's there and it's sharp, and it managed a 16.
Smoke on.
Yeah, the red arrows are always going to be popular. Again, the photographer here has introduced some of their self into the image by going monochrome and colour. And that in itself is a technique that is not easy to do, because you're going to have to use a bit of Photoshop and cut the aircraft out or put the background in, which may well have already been there and you've just kept the reds. Excuse me. And again, they're in a sort of, almost a straight line. I would have preferred them to be perhaps in sort of landscape line where they're coming at you. These are flying over you. So it certainly is a good attempt. There's no doubt about that. And it is in the creative mould as well. A 16 for the red arrows.
Frozen.
As I said about botanical studies, and this I thoroughly enjoyed. I know that the technique is relatively simple. You put it in a bowl of water, shove it in the freezer and wait for the morning. But in this sense, it's resulted in an extremely good image. You've handled the exposure very well. We've got this depth to the ice. That I'm enjoying. And even where there are pockets of air or oxygen contained within the ice, that we can see those delicate areas within that block that we can clearly see here. The two poppy seeds coming out either side of the bloom are really that's added bonus. You could read into that what you like, couldn't you? Could almost be dancing. Is it Strictly? I don't know, but we're going to hang on to that one.
Okay. Common big eye.
Yeah, now, I mean, those that snorkel, and I presume this is in the natural world, it certainly doesn't look like an aquarium, does it? It looks like I can't swim, so I've never been snorkeling around coral, but this is where these fish are found, and subsequent species. We normally would look at a clownfish is the one that they generally use because it's striking, but so is the big eye. It really has that striking element within the scene. And it's a very strong naturalist image because we can look at the coral. There's even a sense of, what's happening to the natural world. It's not quite, the coral is in full bloom within the scene. It's not been bleached by what we're doing to the oceans, where it's getting too warm and polluted. So I'm really enjoying that as a part of the world that I would never see, because as I said, I would drown. Unfortunately, just some people might think that's a good thing. Anyway, I'm going to hold that back.
Okay. Istanbul.
Yeah, now I've not been to Istanbul, and of course this is where East meets West, and the tram is certainly an import from the West. Now, perhaps the streets from the East really quite narrow. Again, here we do have elements that are slightly impinging on the whole scene, especially this lady in red. Really is annoying. I'd have waited till she walked out of the scene. Either that, or you'd have been run over by the tram, because obviously I wasn't there. And I think I'd like to make more of it, because they are attractive, our trams. They really are. There's lots of the Porto's got them, haven't they? In those rugged old stone streets with these trams running down them. I think that's the sort of image we all have of trams. Here, it certainly has an impact, but it's this woman on the left that really grabs your attention. There's another one further round to the right, beyond the tram, which again is a bit of a pull. And some of the literature you can literally read, and you don't really want to be able to do that. So opening up the aperture, throwing that background out, would certainly add an impact to it. And the 12 for that one.
Harper.
Yeah, so I enjoyed Harper. In red, she's very attractive, isn't she? The top hat really does complement her red lips and her red garb. And there is just that element of the hand being amputated. I know it's difficult what to do with hands, but when you amputate them, they look worse than when you perhaps put them elsewhere. And it's very difficult to actually use them within your scene. Your model really has to know what they're going to do with their hands, and there's no shortage of how many images you can take once you've got a model in the studio. You can photograph her 1,000 times and then sift through them all and sort out the best from all that you've taken. But I find cutting the hand off really is not the right thing to do with Harper. I might, for my money, might have just given her head and shoulders. The buttons are a slight distraction, but they do actually bring the red out of the coat that she's wearing, or the garments. Attractive as well, and an 18 for Harper.
That's Helen Mellish. Rural postbox.
Yes, I said about postboxes. Now this has got real enrichment about the red. And it may be the same the letterbox that we saw earlier, and in different light. And it just shows you what light can do, the way it can enhance an image, the way that the whole image has got a very much brighter element about it, even a touch of blue sky. But it still is only a letterbox. And they are attractive, and I think you've done as well as you wanted to do with this image, because once you've taken the box, really, what else do you do with it? I prefer them in buildings because they make a good, strong focal point within colours of buildings. So you certainly use your camera craft to get the red of the postbox. You've thrown as much of the background as you could possible, and a 15 for that.
Your title will show as colour. It was actually red was the title.
Oh, right. Okay. So red. Well, it's certainly got red. And again, with still life, you have to be careful the elements that you're using and the way that you compose them. Okay, we are running into one another. The glass with the sherry, I presume, in it is almost being lost into the sherry canter on the table. And then we have the elements of the lights as the background, making it really that extra bit busy, which is a real shame, especially the one that's laying on the table, because it draws your eye to it. and you want to make more of the main subjects, which I presume was going to be the sherry and the glass, better illuminated from the back so that the light comes through, and that gives it an instant appeal straight away. So unfortunately, I didn't feel that this needed some improvement. So a 13 for your efforts.
And the last one in this section, Husky Racing.
Yeah, you see the dogs are very happy. I'm reading at the moment Finn, the police dog that was brutally stabbed, and his recovery. It's a fascinating book about an Alsatian, and Huskies are almost northern Alsatians because they all derive from the wolf, and you can distinctly see those features within these dogs. And they look like they're panting, they're just on a stroll. Again, the person they're pulling with the 56 and the red top, really grabs your attention. And you kind of, again, you're fighting between the two main features in the image. I'd like to see either of them blurred. I'd like to see the dogs blurred and the rider sharp, or either way round. But to just give it a sense of motion. It's been frozen completely, and I presume, yes, they are pulling, so the feet are off the ground, so they're in motion. And I think you could have done more with that at a slower shutter speed, and a 14 for Husky Racing.
Okay, excellent. Right, so we have 7
Yes.
held back, I believe. So I shall, let's do that. And do you want to run through, or should we just work our way through?
No, I already know.
Yeah, okay, yeah, okay. In which case, we'll start with Ninja Red then.
20.
And that's Colin Brister.
Well done.
And then we have Cyclamen Flower.
Exquisite. 20.
That's Claire Norman. And, oops, you nearly got 29 then, Claire. That would have been quite good. Right, Claret.
Yes, I love the imaginative approach to this, and that got a 20 as well.
Excellent. Sally Freeman. The City of Arts and Sciences.
Valencia is well worth visiting whenever you go because it's fascinating. 19.
That's Diane LeCount. Dahlia Crown.
Yes, I enjoyed the detail in this, and a 19 for that as well.
That's Sophia Spurgeon. Frozen.
Yeah, I thought this was fabulous. Again, the photographer thought about what they wanted, and obviously got what they got when they pulled it out of the freezer. 20.
That's Tony Perryman. And last of all, Common Big Eye.
And I really enjoyed that. I love the sense of scale as well. And I presume you are a scuba diver. 20.
That's Neil Atkins. Okay. Right, so let me just save all those scores so we don't lose those. And then we'll move on and we'll make a start on the mono, if that's okay, Ron.
That's fine by me.
Yep,
No
excellent.
problem.
Okay, so we'll do the run through.
Yes, please.
Yep, and then we'll start and mark the first sort of 15, 16 of them. Right, okay, here we go.
Brilliant.
Okay, so first up we have little egret.
Yes, you can see that monochrome is totally different. It's to where we all started as photographers. And monochrome is all about design, texture, and everything else that we know about our photographic trade. We're not relying on any colour to actually give it an extra impact. So you're relying on how you expose for the subjects that you're taking. And we're starting with a little egret, which are on the increase here in the down south, the south of the whole of England, or the southern Britain, because they're coming up from Spain and Africa, the warmer climes. As we are getting warmer, they are settling here and actually breeding in rather large numbers. Again, I love the way that this particular bird has been isolated. And here again, you've got the aspect of monochrome with that dark background, nothing in there interfering with the overall scene, and the bird placed again strongly on the left-hand side of the image, looking it towards the right. And there's all these elements, so the camera craft that this photographer is using is spot on. And I like the design, and I like the way it's been exposed. And we're going to start with an 18.
That's Claire Norman. Grey heron.
Yes, they're just slightly different. You see that the previous image, the actual little egret wasn't illuminated. It stood out from the background. Here we have a grey heron that's distinctly illuminated. The background is slightly over sharp for me. I would have preferred the background to be the previous image. But I enjoyed the detail. That's what I think has come across here. The photographers still retain the detail in monochrome. It's got a catchlight in the eye. The bill is sharp because, again, they're very fidgety birds. You could press the shutter and it just moves, so it goes out of focus. And the background has been handled rather well. There's not too many bright lights. There's only on the right-hand side there, which you could have cropped off and it wouldn't interfere with the overall scene. It shows the grey heron in its environment. The 17 for that.
Tower Bridge.
Well, we all know what Tower Bridge looks like, but here we've got to guess the rest, haven't we? We can see the tower and the walkway, and then there's some impinging areas in the scene itself. And we all know where this is on the south bank. It's that heavy reflection on the top. It really does interfere overall. I might have cropped or got down even lower and got rid of those impinging elements at the top of the frame, and perhaps try to find an angle as to what, I think they're trees, yeah, that are in the scene further down. And they slightly add this element of confusion. Where all the figures are, again, they're well spaced, but I would have liked them to actually be a little bit more forward, fill in the foreground a bit better, give it a bit more impact, because we have the convergence and the vanishing point. That works well. But there are elements in it and making it rather heavy. But as a monochrome, I still felt it was appropriate, and a 16.
Wheel coat mine.
Yeah, this may have had a sky added to it, or certainly has been enhanced. We know that you can get this sort of stormy weather down in the south, and if you look at the wave patterns, perhaps there is a bit of a wind blowing, but the actual structure itself that gives it the name, the title of the image, the wheel coat mine, that really is strong, isn't it? It's a good shape with the chimney added to it. But again, we got a lot around it. I would have tried it from different angles, and I'm sure the photographer did, from round the other side, looking the other way, etc., and sorted out what they would deem to be the best side or the best elements contained. I'm just looking at it a bit closer. There is an element of white line around the building, so that does sort of give me a suspect that the sky may have been added. So you've done your best with it. I like the shape and design, and a 16 as it stands.
Bishop's effigy.
Yeah, I felt here, this is under your control. It's not going anywhere, is it? It's a solid subject, and you could really go to town with it. I might have gone in with a telephoto, or really gone in with a 50mm and concentrated on some of the texture of this particular effigy that we have within some cathedral or church. As it stands, it's just a record shot, and that doesn't demean it, because I think you've got detail within there, but it's not strong as compared with what else we have in tonight. And that's the trouble. When compared with what's in the rest of the evening, you have to compare that and then give an appropriate mark compared with the top image and the other ones that you sort of decide are not so good. And in this case, it's a 12 for the bishop.
Okay. Two of a kind.
Well, we all love zebras because they are, they're actually mules that have been painted, haven't they? They walked into the paint shop and come out all stripy. But in this case, unfortunately, they're not bitingly sharp. And that's what I wanted. I know they're merging, and that's what zebras do, because that's why they have stripes. Because all the predators that come after them, they've got stripes, they lose an individual within a herd. When they stampede, and that's what lions like to do, they generally try and pick one individual, get it out of the herd, and then kill it. When they're all together, they cannot distinguish between one and the other because the stripes actually merge. So that's a bit of natural history, camouflage that really comes into its own. But I felt these weren't sharp enough. I wanted them to be a bit more crisp than they are, and unfortunately a 9 for that.
Okay. Sorry about this, just a little technical problem. There we go. Oops. Hands.
Yes, and Hans is looking directly at the camera. Again, here, it's a good portrait. I think, again, could have done something with the light. Could have made it a bit more contrasty, because with the male portrait, you really need to go to town. With the female, you need to soften it, of course, to get it more femininity. But with a male, it's masculinity that we're after, aren't we? We really want to make it more of it. And again, we have the intrusive background, but it should be totally out of focus. There's no reason for that to be as sharp as it is. You've got to read every one of those spines of the books. We'll know all the titles. Hans is definitely giving us that direct gaze, and for that, you get that extra mark because you have got his attention. There's catchlights in the eyes, which I presume to be just a small bit of flash being added just to illuminate him. But I think I'd like to see him stronger with more contrast, give him that kind of mean look, perhaps. But a 12 for Hans.
M11 underpass.
Yeah, I hope you didn't stop on the M11 and leave your car and go and do this shot. You'd be in trouble. You can see why the photographer chose this particular point of view, because the inverted V's, or the V's of the structure, inverted triangles in actual fact, really make, they are quite photogenic, aren't they? And the way that they're illuminated, you know, the three elements contained within the rear of the scene that are illuminated, and in the foreground, it's a little bit dull. I might have gone in a bit tighter and used those three structures that are illuminated with the tree in the background and made more of it. I think we have a bit too much of the underpass, and you know, it's a good thing to go and do. It's a good subject to actually go and record, and perhaps you can actually experiment with something like this man-made object. You can tackle it as and how you wish. But in tonight's sort of competition, it's a 13.
Unwrapped.
Yes, she's definitely unwrapped. I do like a bit of nudity myself. Not me personally. Well, yeah. But you wouldn't get me in front. Well, you might in the front of the camera. I did enjoy it. I like the game. It's cliched in certain aspects, but it's very much, you know, the subtlety of a woman, and she is very attractive. There's no doubt about that. And she's not one of your skinny models. She has a bit more flesh about her, and that is great to see, because models all sizes should be photographed if they wish to. I like the way it's been illuminated. I like the background being dark, so she stands out, and you've done something with her hands. They're not looking unattractive. They're not looking out of place. You know, she certainly knows how to pose, and you certainly know how to illuminate. So I'm going to hold that back, please.
Cliveden.
Yes, Cliveden, very interesting building and a wonderful National Trust property. And you get a view over the Thames. When I went there recently, well, last year, they managed to rip up all the gardens, because it was closed to the public or general public. You're only allowed in there, you know, certain numbers when they had the COVID was at its worst, or before it was at its worst, like it is today. And it didn't look too attractive. And Cliveden itself is an attractive building, but again, it's very difficult to photograph. You're trying to perhaps do too much by doing the whole building. I'd concentrate on that staircase that's in the foreground, which is pretty obvious because it's at angles to each other, and you wait for people to go up and down. The Cliveden itself is a very impressive building, no doubt about that. I like the inclusion of the figures on the plinth there, the statues. I think that gives it an extra element, gives it a different height. But in general, it's about the lighting. I do believe, you know, it wasn't at the best time, unfortunately. You know, I'd have preferred, you know, a bit more contrast in the building itself. So that's only a 13.
Cohen.
Yeah, you really have gone, you know, you've broken all the rules here, and it's fantastic. And that's something that we need to encourage. You know, we've only got the one eye. You know, the right eye is obscured by her hair curls. And I think that's terrific. And even the lighting is very soft and subdued. There's no harsh lights. There's no deep blacks. You know, really concentrating on that eye and her facial expression. And the curls of a young girl, you know, really are always enhanced. And I'm sure Mum was over the moon about this image, because they just adore their daughters. And I felt this was appropriate as well, so I was going to hold that back also.
Okay. Fornham Coalbar.
You wouldn't believe this. I went and took that before we had the second lockdown. When that sort of time in between, I drove to Norfolk, and I couldn't get down this blasted road where this barn is, because there was people everywhere. There must have been every dog and every person in Norfolk had descended upon Fornham, and the light was, well, it was a bit better than this, but not much better. And I never bothered with the images that I took. And I find it's very difficult. This sort of scene needs to have atmosphere, doesn't it? It needs a good foggy morning, or a drop of snow, or even torrential rain. just needs something else to actually lift the scene. We got what we have again. We've got what was there, and you've taken it. We didn't need all that foreground. I feel as if that's intrusive, and we didn't need all of that sky either. I might, for my money, I'd have really cropped it down to that central area, and that managed a 12.
Reggie.
Yes, he's all smiling. He knows he's having his photograph taken, and he's really giving it to you right full on, isn't he? There's no doubt about that. But compared with the previous portrait that we had of the young girl, it's just not on the same scale, unfortunately. I might again would have taken him in, done something with him like I would with the earlier portrait of the gentleman. Lit them so there's a little bit more contrast in his features, make them stand out. His smile, is very, very, very endearing, and his hairstyle as well. But for me, it's not in the same quality and context that we've already seen. So that was a 12 for Reggie.
Cycling in Valencia.
Yes, we're back to Valencia, and those wonderful structures and this kind of design that's got the arch of the building or that's holding it up to act as a tunnel, and it's all repetitive as well. And then they do cycle up and down here all the time. It's in constant use in Valencia. No matter what time of day or night you go there, there's always going to be somebody riding through, because in Valencia, that's the sort of normal part of the transport, because if you take a car, you're not going very far because the place is jammed. So I like the structure. I like the way you've used it as your frame and where the cyclist is. I think just a little bit further forward would have added just a little bit more impact, and we have another one coming up later. So again, you've placed yourself in the position, you use what photographic craft you have, and you've used the elements of the architecture as well. So this one gets an 18.
That's Sophia Spurgeon. Sunday afternoon drive.
This one definitely gave me a chuckle, and the photographer deserves, certainly credit. I know that again, it's probably cliche. We would all do it, but this dog is extremely obedient. It's a Labrador. He obviously likes to go for a drive. He's even got his scarf. What you can't see is his driving gloves are on the front paws because he's ready to go. I like, again, diffuse background. This is how you use your depth of field. You wipe out the background, but there's enough in the information there to tell us what it is, and the dog and the car are perfectly sharp. And Sunday afternoon drive got an 18 as well.
That's Claire Norman. And last one before we take a quick break. Looking in.
I think this might sound inappropriate, but I thought this was kind of a suggestive image. I thought he might be about to pat her on the backside. It kind of looks like he's going there, isn't it? But that's just the way you've photographed it. Steam engines and steam trains are always going to be intriguing, are going to be photogenic, and they're certainly interesting as well. Perhaps it's all about the light in this instance. It's very harsh, isn't it? And perhaps you're trying to include too much in the image. I might have gone in and waited for things to happen if they were going to happen. But as it stands, unfortunately, it's a bit insidious, really, one way and another. And it was a 14 that got, unfortunately.
Okay. Excellent. Right. On that note, we will take a very quick break, if that's okay, and I'll hand back over to Di.
Okay. Are we okay just with 5 minutes for a quick comfort break?
Oh, yeah.
And you can talk amongst yourselves if you want to. Personally, I need to go to the little girl's room. And I'll see you all in a minute. But yeah.
Lady.
That's right. A not so painted lady, because it's in monochrome. And it's a very good painted lady. These particular butterflies, well, we have generally an influx of them around about August, and they all come up from the south. They're very common in France and Spain, and when it gets warm and it drifts over, they all come with it. Because butterflies can fly for a phenomenal amount of mileage. You know, when you think the monarch starts in Canada and goes all the way down to Mexico, you know, that gives you some idea of what butterflies do when they're flying. And this one's a very good one as well. The antennae are not quite sharp, but then that's because they're very fine and all they need is a breath of wind and they go soft. But it's certainly the photographer's been brave doing it in monochrome. And I think in that sense, you know, it deserved an extra mark. So that's a 17 for the painted lady.
Okay. All right.
Yes, it's okay, don't worry.
A resting red deer.
Well, it certainly is a resting red deer, and it's probably in Richmond Park or Bushy Park, several of the parks, or even Bradgate that we have in the UK, where these deer are contained within the park, and it makes it quite easy for us photographers to get them. The only other place you're going to find them is go into the Highlands, where it's a little bit more difficult, but they are large enough to take, and they certainly are attractive. Our largest deer, of course, by a long chalk, and this particular individual is taking a rest. But you can see that the way the light is actually interfering with the exposure. It's very bright on this side lit part of his face, and that kind of draws our attention. Add to that the sort of the dappled background light. There's a particular light bright area directly almost above his head, and that grabs our eye as well as the one on the right hand side. And you have to be careful with exposure. You know, perhaps tone it down a bit when you're processing, just to get some of that texture back in the coat of the deer itself. And that managed a 12.
Spider Bandus.
Now, when you compare the red deer with this, you know the comparison. I know that is the trouble when doing subjects where it's open. You get such a variety of subject matter. This is a jumping spider, which we can find mostly in our houses. They live in very close proximity to us. And then we have wolf spiders that run around the floor. They're the ones, the big ones, that everybody screams when they see it crawling across the carpet. But this is a jumping spider, and it's absolutely magnificent. I love the way the photographer, using a macro lens, because they are that small, to get the detail of the spider complete. I love the eyes. Those eyes are really, there's 32 of them, I think, in each pod. They really know what's going on. And those feathers at the front, the pallips, underneath are the fangs that dispatch whatever their prey is. So I'd like to hold that back.
Okay. Ash Valley.
Yeah, well, it's a good time of year, isn't it? This is the season with our mellow mists and no leaves on the trees, so we have skeletons and we have atmosphere. I think here I'd have preferred perhaps a different point of view. There is a lot of landscape, a lot of field to cover before we get to the first tree. I love the recession going off to the right. I thought that's very strong. Again, cropping some of that sky off. We don't need it. We need to concentrate on the skeletal trees and then into the recession in the background, allowing us to sort of gently go into the landscape. And I felt you may have just slightly missed the mark on that one, but there are some others in here tonight that you could look at and think, well, yes, that's the idea. So a 14 for that.
Okay. Grain unloading at Tilbury.
Yes, very much an industrial scene. And I want to know why you didn't go beyond the mud and get down to the bank. Of course, you would have disappeared into it at Sheppey or Tilbury, because this is the River Thames, of course. And again, we've got a bit of each. We've got a bit of nature and we've got some industry, but it's kind of cut into by the grain silos themselves, where they run the grain backwards and forwards from the ships to the silos, etc., etc. And all those structures are kind of dissected. And that is the problem with the scene, is that it's got a lot of dissection. between the top and the bottom. You actually, in actual fact, you've almost got two images. If you cut it at the bank side of the River Thames, you've got that industrial scene, and below you have the natural scene of, you know, the mud flats. So for me, it sort of had a bit of both, but I enjoyed the texture contained within it, and a 15 for it.
Okay. Hong Kong Harbour.
Right, something a little bit different here, because this is using manned structures, and they certainly are tall in Hong Kong. I do believe you can go up onto that hill and get Hong Kong at night, and we've all seen it. It looks splendid the way it's illuminated. Here, I like the juxtaposition of the modern architecture with, although the craft that we see in the water, the ferry, is not so ancient, but it's not so new either. You know, they have plied their trade between the islands, you know, Hong Kong, with these crafts, and they've not changed in their construction. So it is fitting that these two are included together. So there's that juxtaposition of the sort of not old, but related, and the new. And again, it's the sky. I'd like to see a little bit more contrast in that sky. Perhaps a good thunderstorm would have certainly aided and abetted the overall scene. So for that one, it's a 16.
Desres on Greenland Dock.
Well, Greenland is a fantastic land to actually visit. It doesn't give me that impression from here, but that may only be in name only. For me, I'm wondering about the sky. It's a long exposure, I presume, and the houses themselves look as though they've been placed on a background and don't belong there. I find that the overall sense of the image, it doesn't quite fit the scene. But of course, I might be wrong, so I'm taking it on face value. It looks as though there has been a neutral density filter has been used one way or the other, whether it's the foreground or the background. I'm not going to go down that road. So for me, I felt it just didn't look quite right. And a 14 for that.
Okay. France, maybe.
Yeah. Again, another still life under your control. I feel that the composition is certainly, it's just been placed there. I want some empathy from the elements contained within the scene. I like the background. I love that wall. It's appropriate for France, you know, dilapidated, unloved, etc., etc. We have the Malbec. I'd prefer to have one of those here on my desk, because the Malbec is a terrific wine. I'm not too keen on the cheese, and onions, well, we know what they do, and a beret, well, Frank comes to mind straight away. I think the whole elements are not gelling together like they should. They've been placed there and photographed, and I think that's all that's happened. I want to see a little bit more of what these represent contained within the image. So unfortunately, that got a 12.
Shadow Walker.
Yes, I certainly enjoyed this image. Again, I like the point of view from above. Now, you're using the shadows of the barrier on the paving, and then the walker or the person going through the scene with those extended shadows. So it's getting near sort of the latter part of the day where the sun's lower in the sky, so the shadows are longer. And the top part being completely black doesn't allow us to escape. It keeps us in. I like all the texture that's been contained in it as well. And I really enjoyed it. There's plenty of room for the walker to walk into. So, you know, it has a kind of action or motion about it in general. Hold that back as well, please.
Okay. Old Tree.
Well, this could be the Edward Munch painting, couldn't it? It could be the scream in the beech tree, as it were, which I presume this might be. It could be an oak as well. It's certainly ancient, but we have an indication of a mouth and perhaps an eye and a face of some description. Beyond that, you know, you've you tried to make the most of what was in front of you. And I think in texture wise, you've accomplished that, and in monochrome, because we have definitely the texture of the tree, the trunk, and all those parts that are broken off it as well. And that managed to get a 13.
Trunk.
Yeah, I had a good look at this. And I felt that it's just not sharp. Now, that might be the projection of it, but considering whatever all the others have all been sharp where they should be, I feel that this one's been let down by the lack of sharpness. I like the way it's been processed, and the I've gone and lost the words. My goodness, that's unusual, isn't it? The contrast, that's the word I'm looking for. But I feel as if it could have been darker and it could have been more menacing. But it is the lack of sharpness that I wasn't over enamored with. This is not going anywhere. It should be much sharper than it's seen on my screen. And that, unfortunately, only managed a 10.
The dark web.
Yeah, it was saying, as soon as you compare it with the next image, you see how sharp this image is. It lends itself to sharpness anyway, does the spider's web with the dew on it. And then we have the dark frame all the way around. And here, where there is a bright area, allows you to escape beyond the web. And perhaps that's what we're all going to do in lockdown, as we'll be so fed up with looking at it. But I like nature's jewels, as it were, created by that 8-leg phenomena of the spider. It certainly does come across rather well. I like the contrast and a little bit of man included within it. So it's nature using man's structures, and that's a 17.
Captured by the light.
Yes, at rest in somewhere that looks really quite religious, doesn't it? It looks as though it's in a cathedral or some sort of aspect, certainly a large building. And the photographers used, again, camera craft, used the moment the light has appeared and it's glancing down onto this person who's either reading or drawing or taking in the surroundings one way or another. We have the posts in the background that keep the public away from something precious. And they're not too much illuminated, so they're not impinging on the overall composition. I like the way you've used the light, especially in exposure terms. We've got enough detail in the lit and enough detail in the shadows. And that, for me, was an 18.
That's Liz Happer. Cartwheel.
Yes, we've seen quite a few of these tonight where the photographer has come across the object or the subject and then taken it. We need to put something of ourselves in the image that we're photographing. Get some sort of essence from it. This again is another record shot. You've only included sort of 3/4 of the wheel. Perhaps using all the wheel and getting down really low. Looks like you wouldn't get in anybody's way. Made the most of the structure. I feel you haven't gone far enough in that department. Now, you've taken it and it's a record shot, but there are some areas where it's slightly over bright, not entirely overexposed, but it is getting very close. And that was a 13.
Summer holiday.
Yeah, and another image that I felt that you've missed the mark. Putting all the action over on the right-hand side, although that breaks the rules, and why shouldn't we? We've got a lot of open space on the left. Now, I'd have preferred perhaps to go over towards the right and made the most of all those young lads making the most of the action of the waves. The cloudscape, it really does fall into, the photogenic terms. Perhaps, a bit more contrast in that sky. It's got foreboding about it. There's certainly rain coming out of those clouds if you look towards the distant horizon. But there's a lot of this on the left-hand side. And in landscape photography, we've got to travel to get to where the important parts are in the image. And that doesn't actually help the overall context of the image, what it's trying to express. So that managed an 11.
Roofs, Barbican.
Yes, I think we've all been there. We all know what those roofs are. Now, again, you put a bit of yourself into this image by tilting the camera and tilting those roofs. Has it worked? Well, it's repetition, and you've got the structure. Okay, there's detail in it. It's making the Barbican look extremely gloomy. You know, I don't know if you want to live there by looking at this image, because some of those penthouses are worth £1 million. We have that bright area just at the top, and that's the brightest thing in the whole scene. So it's dragging the eye up beyond these roof bits, of course. And I find that's a distraction, which is really unfortunate. It wouldn't take anything to get rid of that. So I commend you on going for the tilt, but it does lack a sort of impact. That was a 10, unfortunately.
Tree down in Epping.
Yes, unfortunately, this didn't do too well either. I know this tree. I walk past it quite regular when we go into the forest for a walk. Well, if you went in the forest today, it would be for a mud expedition, because it's just a quagmire all the way through Epping Forest. So I'm avoiding it like the plague. But this tree, you know, fell down fairly recently in tree terms, and you see all these branches and all these main boughs are just all over the place. So we haven't got a strong focal point to actually hold us within the overall image. There's too many parts to it, and that is a little bit of a shame. Again, we record these things, but I think you could have made more of it, or not bothered and gone, there's a beautiful tree down to the left of this image on the right hand side, which is well worth photographing. So that's a 9 for that.
Thames Sunday.
Yes, I like the composition in this particular, especially the oval shape of the seat, or the structure that we can see, and the young man, you know, exploring it as well. With his granddad or father beyond, yeah, that then just does take a little bit of the immediate impact that it has. It tones that down slightly, because the boy is blending into the figure beyond, and that is a little bit unfortunate. Again, when these moments happen, you either get it or you don't, because you're not going to get a second crack at it. You can't repeat it. So I think it was just a moment missed. Prior to that would have been great, but a 15 as it stands. I like the diffusion.
Trees in winter.
Yeah, now this is what some of those images we've seen previous is what you should go for. I mean, this has all the atmosphere. It's got a right depth of field. The tree in the foreground is sharp as a razor, as it should be, and the hedges, and they are absolutely smothered in hoarfrost. And that really does add that impact. You feel the chill of winter in this image. And then we haven't got acres of field for us to get lost in. We are actually pulled towards that tree we can see in the background by the sort of the lines on the landscape from where it's been ploughed. And it's a very attractive monochrome, and I'll hold that back, please.
Okay. Lava sill.
Yeah, a little bit different. I mean, again, here you've got to concentrate on the texture within the lava that you can clearly see in the foreground, but you're losing it as we go into the background. There is a rather strong light by the looks of it at the top of the image, and that's detracting. You see, it's taking certain elements of the landscape away. We have brighter areas and perhaps detail in the foreground that we should have concentrated on and left the rest to do its own thing and not included it. So that was a 12.
Falling water.
Well, this one is somewhat similar to the Barbican image, but I feel the composition is better because we certainly have a good exposure. I might have cropped the top off just a fraction, because that is a bright area up there with the figures. It does pull the eye slightly. I love the way you've exposed for the water, and the way the speed that you've used for it as well. It gives the water a distinctive flow. You haven't actually burnt it all out completely. There's some wonderful texture and detail in the foreground. A 14 for that.
Serene boating on Windermere.
Well, if I had my way, that serene boating, that would have been sunk before it got anywhere near this scene, because it's a monstrosity, isn't it? It doesn't fit the scene, does it? For me, they're a total obstruction of all these craft plying their way up and down Windermere. Now, what we do is kind of a bit of a windy composition, and the photographer's almost in two minds. Like we've seen already, do I include loads of sky or loads of foreground, and we'll place that boat in the middle? I felt that, compositionally, it could have been much, much stronger, and an 11 as it stands.
Reach for the skies.
Well, we all know what these are about, and that this is all about telecommunications, and they are absolutely awful and ugly structures. But when they put them into forests, they try and disguise them as trees. It's kind of a disguise. No birds are fooled anyway. They can't find any holes in the trunks. But again, it's a strong structure, and in monochrome, it does stand out. But it's not exciting, is it? I want a little bit more excitement out of it. And perhaps, if you had the time, neutral density to get those clouds to move. If they were moving, that gives it something a little bit extra, gives it a little bit of motion and a little bit more impact. So unfortunately, I managed the 10.
Okay. Oh, bear with me. Right, next we have Drops of Life.
Excuse me, I'm just taking a sip of water. Yes, your botanical studies, whether they're in colour or monochrome, are really excellent at Bishop Stortford. And again, it's another good image with texture. The photographer knew what they were doing. They know what they wanted out of this particular dahlia. And, it's possibly, something that, everybody takes or it's accessible to everybody, but the individuals, and that's what's important, the photographers put something of themselves in the image, and this has got that quality, and it's very enjoyable, and it is symmetrical in its design as well, because that's what nature is all about. So that is an 18.
That's Sue Holtsmith. Half a cup of coffee.
Yeah, I think if you are a coffee addict, half a cup is what you need. Drink a whole cup and you're up all night long, aren't you? It really is good for, as you start to fade at the end of the day, take a cup of coffee and you get an immediate boost. It's very similar to heroin. Oh, sorry, shouldn't say that. Well, I really enjoyed this. This is all about composition, isn't it? It's all about creativity as well. And in monochrome, it's extremely sharp as well, and it's one I'm going to hold back.
Okay. The smaller picture.
Yes, it's always good to look at what's below our eye level, what's at foot level, ground level. And here we've had a bit of frost on the leaves. They've curled and they're very crisp and crunchy. You can almost feel that, can't you? If you were to put your foot there, you'd definitely hear that crunch. And I like that design. I like the composition as well, where the rest of the leaves are interlinking, and this one is out of place. Whether it's been placed there or not, it doesn't really matter. In photogenic elements, it's attractive to look at, and that was an 18.
Tony Perryman. Cycling through the shadows.
Yes, this is the other cycling image that I remember, and this one really does have the impact because we have a very strong main focal point, it's the cyclist, and then we have the structure as well. And for all those that go to Valencia, this is the place to go. You can stand there all day long and take thousands of pictures of people traveling backwards and forwards, doing whatever they're pushing, prams, scooters, riding bikes, whatever. It's so photogenic. It really is the heart of Valencia. And if you ever go to Valencia, go to the Science Park and spend 2 days there. You won't run out of subject matter. So I'd like to hold this back.
Okay. Charrington House.
Well, I was when I looked at this, I felt that again, although it's got contrast, I'm enjoying the modern approach. Really, that the blacks are really black. A bit of soot and whitewash. There is a white almost to the sky as well. But we are losing some elements from the image that should have been retained. Firstly, you've got all the brickwork on the right-hand side, and we're definitely losing it on the left. And that's just taking away a certain impact of the overall element and design. The photographers deliberately excluded parts of the buildings and included what they felt was certainly had an impact. And I enjoyed it for that, but we, as I said, there are some excellent images tonight, and this one managed a 15.
Clovelly.
Well, we all know where it is. We know the cobbled street you have to walk down very carefully, especially if it's been raining, because you could end up in a harbour rather quickly than you wanted to. Here, again, there are lots of elements contained within the image. We have a bit of the landscape in the background, and we have the elements that make up the harbour. And harbours are busy places, is where fish is unloaded and materials, etc., etc. And we can see that contained within the foreground. And we have the structure of the cobbles of Clovelly. That it's certainly got that aspect. It's got lots of texture, and that's where it wins really overall. There was a lot to take in, a lot of information, but it kind of works in monochrome, and a 16 for that.
Lest we forget.
Yes, I think the title is trying to win over the image. In actual fact, I find that the bright sky and the cloth of the clergyman is kind of bright, isn't it? And then we have two other figures over on the right hand side that kind of pull the eye over there. It's all slightly on the tilt, and I feel it's not coming across as it should do. I mean, the title suggests something very strong, as it should, but I'm afraid that the image doesn't live up to the title. I might have tried a different point of view. It looks like he would have been there for some time. He's given some sort of sermon, I presume. But for me, it's just a little bit too busy, muddled, and exposure. It could be better. So that was a 12 for that.
Blackchurch Rock.
Yeah, I've always wanted to photograph this. It looks like an iron that's been embedded into the seabed, doesn't it? And having the figure there really does add that element of impact to the overall scene. It gives us that sense of scale and how rugged this part of the coastline is. And it's quite treacherous to get to the rock itself, especially as the tide has just gone out. They'll be extremely slippery thanks to seaweed and seagrass and goodness knows what else. But the figure there is vitally important to add that sense of scale to the overall natural rock formation. And I'd like to see that again, please.
Okay. Night sky over the quiver trees.
Yes, Namibia. Maggie and I was our last long haul visit, and the quiver trees. We didn't. Unfortunately, we were in the wrong part of Namibia to see the quiver tree forest, but there were sort of elements of quiver trees in certain other locations, singular or a couple together. And this really does bring back Namibia to me with the Milky Way as well, because the sky at night in Africa, no pollution, is just phenomenal. And if you go to Northumberland and Scotland, where there's no lights, you're going to get these wonderful skies and a long exposure as well. And I really enjoyed it in monochrome, so I'd like to hold that back, please.
Okay. Abbey cloisters.
Yeah, again, it's a very difficult image to take because of the contrast between the light and the dark. And you've managed it really quite well. It's not burnt out at all, really, although it could be, just really burnt out on the base of the cloisters, but you've managed to retain just about enough detail, in those pillars. And of course, the floor cobbled really does add to it. Again, it's choosing your point of view, especially with that bright area in the first arch. That really does grab the eye, unfortunately. If that wasn't in there, I think you'd have a better balance overall. And you'd still retain the arches and the lights. A 15 for that.
Holly leaves.
You can distinctly see what holly leaves are all about. They've got that lighter edge on each leaf, which denotes its shape. And here we have a cluster of them. And I think the composition-wise, it's a bit too jumbled. Holly is definitely a difficult tree to photograph, especially its foliage. And separation is always going to be a bit of an issue as to how you do or don't. Obviously, what's caught your eye is the illumination on these particular portion of leaves, and they've been sort of illuminated and they stand out. But it is busy on the left-hand side, and there are some aspects of the image in the background that are interfering. So that managed to 12.
Racing at Pendine Sands.
Yes, they do a lot of this, don't they? Especially in older cars, classic cars. The Pendine Sands they use for world records as well. I think there's several world records have been broken on Pendine when it comes to speed or endurance. I don't know which. I'm not into racing really that much. But we have this element of this car, this vehicle, going quite fast, to say the least, by the way all the debris being thrown up. And that adds to the element of speed as it's going through the image, although it's been frozen, so there's no actual movement on the vehicle itself. You haven't panned with it, unfortunately, but you've got the elements from nature in there, and that got a 14.
Flooded field.
Yeah, I don't know why the photographer didn't go a little bit further. I think having that small section of land that's unflooded in the foreground, that kind of takes away from what you're trying to initially illustrate. That the floods, the rivers burst its banks and it's just gone everywhere. The skeletal trees certainly add to the element of being in winter. And there's certainly greyness in the sky, but it's composition, and you have to look at that very, very carefully. That composition is very important, of course, when we take pictures as to what we include and what we don't. And a 10 for that, unfortunately.
A model view.
Yeah, I thought here there was an element of overexposure within the bright areas. Having the silhouette, which I presume is the model, and there's one below as well, it does break up that pattern that we can see. But it's an image that needs a stronger focal point. It needs to be more delineated, as it were, within the scene. There's a lot going on within it. There's lots of brights and darks, and I feel as if I'm just wandering all over it. I'm not settling on any one part of the image, and unfortunately that managed to 10 as well.
Rise up.
Well, in this sense, this is architectural photography. The photographers really made the most of the structure, and in monochrome it really does work because you show the texture of the building as well. Add to that particular cloudscape really has an empathy for the building also, making it stand out that much more. And the lighting is probably in between. The sun's just gone in, but there's a lot of light bouncing around, and I really enjoyed that. And that was an 18.
That's Diane LeCount. Into the mist.
Well, we've already seen an example of Into the Mist with those trees that we've held back. And that's perhaps what this one should represent as well. It's kind of muddy in its exposure and the way it's been produced. I find it's almost, harking back to good old Prince when you got it out of the darkroom dish and it wasn't quite what you expected. There is an atmosphere, but we have a long way to go with the image. You've got to travel quite a way before we get to the silhouette figure. I would have cropped at least 2/3 of that base off to make us concentrate on where the figure is falling down between the avenue of trees. And that managed a 10.
Loch Katrine.
Well, this is like all Scottish lochs, they are large expanses of water. Here, a neutral density filter has definitely been used to give us the motion in the clouds and the motion on the loch itself. You could argue that there's an awful lot of distance between the headland and where we're standing. We have one rock to act as a stepping stone, but it's not enough. We've got to cover a lot of ground before we get to the interesting part of the landscape. And it's certainly different from this photographer, challenging our view on how landscapes should be taken. And in this particular instance, he got a 16.
Pearly King.
Well, I used to work with a Pearly Queen, and she was magnificent. She didn't mess about when they went out, canvassing to get money for certain causes. All her family were part of the Pearlies, and it's a tradition that's very much East End, and it should continue. It must never be sort of let to just die, because it's a tradition that's really imbues the East End people. And in this particular case, this young man with his cap with all his pearls on it, hence the Pearly Queen, is all the buttons, etc. And the young lass in the background, supporting the overall scene. And it's very patriotic as well, isn't it? So I found it an attractive image and certainly worthy of a 17.
Bradwell.
Yeah, Bradwell. Yeah, it has certain memories for me as Bradwell. I went to do the, I've forgotten, one of the plants. I can't remember. When I got there, they weren't out. And I was so disappointed. I hated Bradwell after that. And it hasn't changed at all. Bradwell, for me, is just mud. But here the photographers made the most of it, giving us kind of an avenue to follow. That we have, again, perhaps a fairly long exposure because we've got some motion in the cloudscape, and we have texture within the foreground, giving us avenues that we can go up to an imaginative vanishing point at the horizon. So it's got lots of texture, and certainly reminds me of Bradwell and the failed expedition to, I forgot what the plant was, but it wasn't there when I got there anyway, so it doesn't matter. A 17 for that.
Plastic.
Yes, I felt here that the fish, how did the fish get into the bottle? It must have sort of elongated and swam in. And it's certainly an image about what we throw into the sea, the way that we just dispose of all the stuff that we don't want. And this is not the way to recycle. This is the way to kill the environment with plastics. And it's of a mega, mega concern at this particular juncture in our lifetime. We need to get a handle on it and stop filling the sea up with rubbish. So this has a very poignant image contained within it, quite literally, and I will hold that back.
First Light.
And this is a beautiful barn owl. I've seen lots of images of barn owls, and I can honestly say this is one of the best I've ever seen in monochrome. It's a wonderful study of this marvelous hunter, the silent hunter, the ghost of the fields and the hedgerows. and you might see them dead in the road occasionally where they've just got a bit too low and the cars come along and just clobbered it and killed it. And I think this is exquisite. This is a wonderful monochrome study of a very elusive and rare bird. Hold that back as well, please.
Okay. After the storm.
Well, you can see what the image is all about here. But did we need, you could ask yourself the question, did we need all of that foreground? We could have lost at least 7/8 of that foreground. It's not doing anything. It's not enhancing the image. It's all about that cloudscape and what's coming over and the way it's going to drop an absolute huge volume of water onto the foreground. So I could have presumed that the photographer didn't want to hang around. They just took this image and probably had to find shelter very, very shortly. But it does spoil the overall sense and impact of the weather on the landscape and the estuary that we can see. That's a bit unfortunate. And a 14 for that.
Walkway, Barbican.
Well, the Barbican is certainly well worth a visit. You go there any time, and there are pictures to be had at every angle. It's a very modern complex made of obviously solid concrete. You can take as many or as little images as you like. It's been the inhabitants of the Barbican do their best to really soften it down with all the flower boxes they have, and there is certain greenery in the interior and certainly aspects of water as well. But here I felt you haven't made the most of it. You kind of just got to the walkway, took a picture, and that figure in there gives us a sense of scale. And for me, there's not enough been made of it at 12.
Okay. Amy T.
Yes, I think Amy, again, is extractive. She looks like she's had a bit of a fright because her hair's standing on end. She's got that gaze, but it's engaging. You engage with this portrait, and she's not pulling any faces. She's just giving you a straight look, and it's kind of enduring as well. And that was an 18.
That's Carol Green. And last for the evening, architecture on a grand scale.
Yeah, it's certainly worse. This is probably not the British Museum. It's the one that's down on the North Bank.
Tate Britain.
Tate Britain, that's it. Yes, you can see the grandeur of it with the columns, and its standard of architectural design really does work. The light and the dark has been very handled by the photographer, and the all-important figure really adds that sense of scale. And it certainly is a competent image, and an 18 for that.
That's Helen Hooker. Okay, so we've got 11 images held back.
Yes, we have, yeah. All right,
I'm glad we agree. Right, and we'll start off with Unwrapped.
And that got a 20.
That's Sally Freeman. Cohen.
That got a 20 as well.
That's Colin Brister. Spider Madness.
Yes, I like 20s. This is a 20 as well.
That's Sue Holt Smith. Shadow Walker.
Yeah, 19.
That's Brian Duffy. Trees in Winter.
Gorgeous. This should be in Landscape Photography of the Year, 20.
That's David Cutts. Half a Cup of Coffee.
That's all we need before we go to bed, 20.
That's Mark Seaton. And we've got Cycling Through the Shadows.
Yes. Where's that? Oh, yes, 20 for that.
That's Diane Lecount. Black Church Rock.
Yes, a 19 for that particular image.
That's Sophia Spurgeon. Night Sky Above the Quiver Trees.
Gorgeous. Reminded me of Namibia straight away, because I used to go out at night. It was pretty safe where we were. The lions were miles away. 20 for that.
That's Sally Freeman. Oops. Plastic.
Yes, undoubtedly, it's all about the elements and the environment and what we're doing to it and the way that we are actually decimating our natural world. 20.
That's Tony Perryman. And finally, First Light.
Yes, this is exquisite, this Darnell. And I could have given it 21. It's fabulous. 20.
That's Colin Brister. Excellent. Thank you very much, Ron. I will hand you back across to Di while I work out the scores.
Wow, that was absolutely brilliant. Some stunning images there, Ron.
Yes.
Absolutely blown away by the standard and the quality of this. Absolutely.
Yes, it's very impressive, and it certainly is. It implies how good your club is. You know, you've got some excellent photographers. They certainly are creative, and they know how to use their equipment. There's no doubt about that. And MOnochrome says it all. MOnochrome's a wonderful.
Yeah, and it's interesting because this is the first time that we've had MOnochrome as a PDI competition.
Yes.
You know, we have it as part of our print, but this is the first time ever. So it's really nice to see it up on the screen. But
Yeah.
I'm aware of the time. Thank you very much. But I'm going to pass over to Sophia to do the vote of thanks. But thanks so much, Ron.
That's okay. Oh, it's only a minute past.
Oh, I know. But, you know, it's most of us are in bed by 8. You know, we have to.
Yeah, but with whom?
Now. Right, Sophia.
Right, thank you, Ron. Your love of photography was very clear from all your comments, and your really interesting descriptions helped us to explore the photos as you talked about them, and all the background information and all the helpful comments. As Di said, you seem to know everything about everything, so it made for a really interesting evening. And we wish you best of luck with your retirement from your judging. And we hope that you enjoy your travelling and get to do some of your own photography. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Sophia. And thank you very much, Bishop Stortford. It's been really enjoyable. I've always loved coming to Bishop Stortford. You've always been a friendly, and you've had absolute quality photographers, always.
Thanks so much, Ron. We've loved having you. So thanks again on behalf of the whole club. Can we do? I'm always reluctant, but let's try a round of applause anyway. If we can unmute ourselves, because thanks so much, Ron.
Thank you, Ron.
Well, thank you.
And good luck, Ron. You know, enjoy your travels. Let's hope you can get travelling soon.
Well, we hope so, but
yeah.
It's all in the balance, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And just everybody stay safe.
Yes.
Because we're at a real severe juncture at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, Mark, how are we doing?
Yes, I'm all ready for you. Excellent.
Oh, good maths.
So for the colour competition, it's fairly straightforward because you're only allowed to enter one image in each. So I'm just going to give you the first places because there was 5 20s, and that was from Neil Adkins, Colin Brister, Claire Norman, Sally Freeman, and Tony Perriman. Who's got the tally on?
No, not me.
Whoever's, thank you. Did we all hear that?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so that's the colour. On the monochrome side of things, I'll give you the first equal and the second equal positions. So second equal position with 38 points was Diane LeCount, Tony Perriman and Sue Holt-Smith, and leading the way both on 40 points, Colin Brister and Sally Freeman.
Well done.
Back to you, Di.
Well done. It's lovely to see that we've got some new members' names coming up frequently, and I think that's absolutely brilliant, absolutely superb. Loved the images tonight. I thought they were absolutely superb. And we've got, 2 more rounds of this competition to go. So, everything to play for. Again, thank you, Ron. Keep in touch. Let us know how your projects go. And we will, we'd love to have you back. So you stay safe, take care, and love and stuff and hugs to Maggie as well. So,
thank you very much. Appreciated. Stay safe.
Yeah.
And good night,
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done, everyone, tonight. Well done. Some great 20s, 19s, 18, all the way through. I thought the stand was absolutely superb. So
Thank you, guys.
congratulations, everybody. And looking forward to seeing you next week. I'll say the name once more. It's with Iñaki Hernandez Lastra on architecture. Promises to be a fantastic, fascinating evening. Looking forward to it. So take care, everyone.
Certainly looks good.
Sleep well.
Bye.
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 Well done.
Bye.
Thanks a lot, everyone. Good night. Thanks.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks, Matthew. Thanks, Mark.